Okay, I want to start today with a question that feels incredibly simple on the surface, but the moment you really start thinking about it, it just unravels everything.
I think I know where you're going with this.
It's about the letter T,
Yep.
just the sound T.
T.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seems straightforward enough.
Right. But here's the thing. If a 5-year-old child screams the word tiger and, say, a 90-year-old man whispers the word toger, acoustically, in terms of physics, those are two completely different events.
Totally different. The pitch, the resonance, the duration.
If you put them on a spectrogram, they wouldn't look anything alike.
They're objectively different. The actual sound waves hitting your eardrum are completely distinct.
Exactly. And yet you, me, every single person listening right now, we all hear the same sound. We hear a T. Our brains are somehow taking this infinite mess of physical noise, ignoring maybe 90% of the data, and just sorting it into this one neat, abstract mental box.
Mhm.
We don't hear the variation, we hear the category.
And that specific ability, that filtering of the noise to hear the structure, that is the absolute foundation of human language. You've just described the discovery of the phoneme.
So today we are going on a deep dive into the evolution and origins of the phonemic principle. We're working off a huge stack of research, but specifically a historical overview by the linguist Harry van der Hulst. And honestly, this isn't just a history lesson, it really is a detective story.
It absolutely is. It's the story of how humanity spent, 2,000 years trying to find the atoms of language?
But it's a detective story where the detectives, well, they kind of hate each other, or at least they strongly disagree on what they're even looking for, because this whole history seems to revolve around this massive conflict between two fields, phonetics and phonology.
That is the core tension. A good way to think of it is body versus mind. Phonetics is the body. It's the study of the physical sound, the raw data, the messy reality of tongues and teeth and air pressure.
That's phonology.
Phonology is the mind. It's the study of the system, the abstract blueprint, the software that tells the hardware what to do. The whole conflict we're going to trace today is, well, it's simple. How do we get from the mess of the physical world to the perfect order of the mental system?
So our mission is to track down this ghost in the machine. How do we move from just, listing noises to actually understanding the mental architecture that runs our speech? And the source material throws a curveball right at the start. It says, this didn't begin with modern science.
Oh.
It began with the alphabet.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about it. The invention of the alphabet was, in a way, the first great scientific theory of language. When some ancient scribe decided to use one symbol, say the letter B, to represent a sound, they were making a huge conceptual leap.
Because everyone says B slightly differently every single time.
Exactly. That scribe was implicitly saying, all these slight variations in how people pronounce this sound, they don't matter, they're functionally the same thing. They were ignoring the phonetic noise to capture the phonological signal.
So they were doing phonemic analysis without even knowing the term?
Precisely.
Yeah.
But for a long, long time, this was just intuitive. Van der Hulst points out that the first person to really nail this down scientifically, to actually prove it, wasn't some Greek philosopher or a Victorian scientist. He was this anonymous guy in Iceland in the 12th century.
The first grammatical treatise.
Okay.
I love this character. We don't even know his name, but you can just picture him sitting in a freezing hut in the Middle Ages, basically inventing modern linguistics.
He was trying to fix the Icelandic spelling system. And to do that, he used what we now call minimal pairs.
Okay, explain that for us. What's a minimal pair?
It's a test. He showed that if you change just one sound in a word in the exact same environment and the meaning changes, then you found two different categories.
Ah, like cat versus bat.
Perfect example, cat versus bat. Everything is the same except for that first sound. Because the meaning changes, we know that C and B are distinct categories in our mental system. They're phones.
That seems so obvious to us now, but back then.
Revolutionary. He proved that sound differences aren't just physical quirks. They're functional tools. They carry meaning. But, as often happens, his work was basically buried. It took another, 700 years for the rest of Europe to catch up.
Which brings us to the 19th century. So we have all these philologists running around, but they were mostly obsessed with history, right? Tracing words back to Latin or Sanskrit. When did they actually start looking at the sounds themselves again?
Late 1800s. You get figures like Henry Sweet in England and Paul Passy in France. Passy's a key figure here. He's the founder of the International Phonetic Alphabet, the IPA.
Oh yeah, the chart with all the weird symbols that actors use to learn accent.
That's the one. But Passy and Sweet immediately ran into a problem. How much detail do you write down? Do you transcribe every little grunt and wheeze? Or just the important stuff?
This is the broad versus narrow transcription debate.
Right. Narrow transcription is the phonetic view, capture every single physical detail. Broad transcription is the phonemic view, only capture what changes the meaning. And Passy realized that for an international alphabet to even work, you had to ignore the tiny details. You had to focus on the broad categories.
So they're circling this concept. They know there's a difference between the sound and the category, but they still haven't named the suspect yet.
No. To get the actual concept of the phone and the modern understanding of it, we have to leave Western Europe and head over to Russia, to the Kazan School.
This is Jan Baudouin de Courtenay and his student, Gruzevsky.
The inventors. And this is where the detective story really twists. Before them, people thought of sounds as, well, as sounds, physical things. Baudouin de Courtenay comes along and says, no, the phone is a psychological unit.
Psychological, so he's moving the crime scene from the mouth to the brain.
He called it psychophonetics. He realized that when you aim to say a T, you have a mental target. The actual sound that comes out of your mouth might be a bit messy. Maybe it's slightly different because you're eating a sandwich or you have a cold. But the intention, the mental image, is pure. That mental image is the phoneme.
That is a huge shift. It means linguistics isn't just about acoustics, it's about cognitive science.
And they went even further. They started looking at how these mental units change their shape, depending on the word they're in. They called it morphophonology.
That's a mouthful.
It is. But think about the word electric. It ends with a K sound.
Okay.
But if I turn it into electricity, that K turns into an S sound.
Right. Electric, electricity, the sound changes.
But the meaning obviously connects them. Courtenay realized there are rules governing these changes. The K and the S are somehow linked in the mental system. They were starting to map out the software of the brain.
This sounds a lot like what Ferdinand de Saussure was doing in Geneva around the same time. He's the guy everyone quotes in art school, right? The signifier and the signified.
He is. And Saussure was definitely influenced by the Kazan School. He's the one who formalized that famous divide, Lang versus parole.
Where Lang is the system.
The rules of the game. The abstract structure.
And parole?
It's the concrete act of speaking, the actual move you make on the board. The phoneme belongs to Lang. It's part of the invisible system that makes the game possible.
Okay, so we have the concept. It's mental. It's abstract. But we still don't really know how it works. How do all these phonemes interact with each other? And that brings us to the 1930s and the Prague School. Prince Trubetskoy and Roman Jakobson.
These are the titans of structuralism. Trubetskoy looked at all these phones and said, these aren't just items in a bag.
Meaning you can't just make a grocery list of a language's sounds and call it a day.
Exactly. He argued that phonemes exist in a network of oppositions. A sound is defined by what it is not.
Whoa, hold on. That sounds incredibly abstract. How does a child even learn a negative definition? A kid doesn't know what a sound isn't.
Well, think about a traffic light. Red only means stop, because green means go.
Yeah.
If you only had one color, the signal means absolutely nothing. The value comes from the contrast.
Ah, okay.
Trubetskoy said language works the same way. A P is only a P because it's distinct from a B, and it's distinct from a T. The whole system is built on contrast.
So it's a grid of differences.
Yes, and Roman Jakobson took this idea and just smashed the atom. He said, why stop at the phoneme? He realized the phone itself isn't the smallest unit. You can break it down into distinctive features.
Features, like how it's made.
Exactly. Features like voicing, are your vocal cords vibrating or not, or nasality is air going through your nose. Jakobson proposed that these are basically binary switches, plus or minus voice, plus or minus nasal.
So a B isn't a solid block. It's just a bundle of settings, like plus voice, plus lip closure.
Correct. And this leads to one of the trickiest, but honestly most revealing concepts from the Prague School, neutralization.
Ah, this is the German example. I have to admit, when I read this in the source material, I had to pause for a second. Can you walk us through this, but maybe help us visualize it for those of us who don't speak German?
Absolutely. So in German, the sounds D and T are totally different phones. They change meanings. But there's a quirk in the German system. At the very end of a word, that difference is deleted. It's neutralized.
So even if the word is spelled with a D, you say it like a T.
Exactly. Take the German word for wheel, which is rad, spelled R-A-D, but a German speaker says rat. Now, take the word for council, which is rat, spelled R-A-T. They pronounce that rat, too.
So at the end of the word, the opposition just collapses. The system shrugs and says, make them both T's.
Trubetskoy called the result the archiphoneme. It's a moment where that contrast just vanishes. To give you an English analogy, imagine if the words bad and bat were perfectly distinct in the middle of a sentence. That is a bad apple. That is a baseball bat. But now imagine if whenever they appeared at the very end of a sentence, English rules forced you to say bat for both of them.
That would be so confusing. You wouldn't know if I was holding a baseball bat or just being evil.
Well, context would tell you, but structurally, the sound difference is gone.
Yeah.
This proved to the Prague School that the system is dynamic. It's not just a static list of sounds. It's a set of logic gates that open and close depending on where the sound sits in the word.
Okay, so Europe is getting deep into the mental structure, the logic gates. But meanwhile, across the ocean, something very different is happening. We need to talk about the Anglo-American split.
Yes, this is where the story turns into a bit of a philosophical war. On one side, you have the mentalists, and on the other, the behaviorists.
And the ringleader for the mentalists was Edward Sapir, right?
Right. Edward Saber. He was very much aligned with that old Kazan school. He believed in the inner system. He famously argued that the physical measurement of a sound was completely secondary to the psychological pattern in the speaker's mind.
He cared about what you thought you were saying, not just what the microphone picked up.
Exactly. But then there was Leonard Bloomfield.
The heavyweight champion of American structuralism. And from what I gather, he wanted to turn linguistics into a hard science, like chemistry or physics.
Bloomfield was a strict behaviorist. You have to understand the era. This is the 1930s, the 40s. Psychology was seen as, wishy-washy. You can't see a mind. You can't measure a thought in a test tube. So Bloomfield decided, if we can't see it, we don't study it.
He kicked the mind out of linguistics.
He essentially kicked meaning out of linguistics. He wanted to analyze language based purely on distribution, which is just where the sounds physically appear. And he established this incredibly rigid rule called by uniqueness.
By uniqueness. That sounds like a corporate buzzword. What does it actually mean?
It means a strict one-to-one relationship. If you hear a sound, you must know exactly which foam it is. And if you see a foam on the page, you must know exactly how it sounds. No ambiguity, no invisible mental steps.
But wait a minute. Go back to that German example. If rad, wheel, sounds like rat at the end of a word, Bloomfield would have to say it is a T?
Yes.
But it's not. It's clearly a D that's just pretending to be a T for a second. If you make it plural rater, the D comes right back.
And that is exactly where Bloomfield's system just completely broke down. He would have to say, sorry, I can't hear the D in the singular form, so scientifically it's a T. He forced linguists to ignore the underlying logic of the language because it wasn't physically audible in that split second.
That seems unbelievably limiting. It's like trying to understand a computer by only looking at the pixels on the screen and refusing to even look at the code.
That is the perfect analogy, and that exact frustration is what eventually blew the whole system up.
The generative revolution.
Noam Chomsky and Morris Halle, 1968. The Sound Pattern of English, or just SPE.
This is the book that changed everything.
It really did. They looked at Bloomfield by uniqueness and basically said, this is ridiculous, we're missing the entire point. They argued that phonology is the code. It's a computer program running in your head.
So walk us through this program. How did they see it?
They proposed a system of deep derivation. You start with an input, which they called the underlying form. This is the abstract concept in your head. Then you run it through a series of ordered rules, the script, and you get the output, the surface form you actually say.
So for the German example.
The input is rad with a D. The rule is final obstruent devoicing. If a voice sound is at the end, turn off the voice. The output is rat.
Bloomfield would have called that cheating.
He absolutely would have. He'd say, you're just inventing a D that isn't there. Chomsky and Halle's response was, the D is there in the mental dictionary. The rule just hides it on the surface.
And this let them connect words that look totally different on the surface.
Oh, and this is where it gets really wild. They started connecting things that Bloomfield would never have dreamed of touching. Take the words father and paternal.
Okay. Father, paternal. They obviously mean related things, but they sound nothing alike. F versus P, thee versus T.
Right. A Bloomfieldian structuralist would just say these are different words, maybe historical cousins, but separate items in your brain. Chomsky and Halle said, no, these are the same word deep down.
Wait, seriously, they claimed father and paternal have the same underlying form in your head right now.
They argued there's a single abstract root, something like PTR, and then a huge stack of ordered rules applies. For father, a rule kicks in that turns the P to F from old Germanic sound shifts. For paternal, A different rule kicks in because of the suffix, and it keeps the P.
That feels, I don't know, like a conspiracy theory. You're connecting dots that are miles apart.
That was exactly the criticism. It was called the abstractness controversy.
I know.
Critics said, you guys have way too much imagination. You're writing rules that are so complex, no human brain could possibly learn them.
It's the poverty of imagination critique, isn't it? Which is so ironic, because it sounds like they had too much imagination.
The critique was that their theory allowed for anything. If you can just write enough rules, you can turn cat into dog. It became too powerful, too abstract.
So how do we fix that? If Bloomfield was too rigid and Chomsky was too abstract, where did the field land?
Well, the source material touches on the modern successor, which is optimality theory, or OT.
Right, this is the survival of the fittest model for sounds.
Exactly. In the 90s, linguists moved away from these long, ordered lists of rules. Instead, they proposed constraints.
Like guardrails.
More like conflicting demands.
Yeah.
Imagine you have one constraint that says be faithful to the input, so don't change sounds.
Right.
You have another constraint that says be easy to pronounce, so don't have difficult sound clusters. These two desires are always fighting.
So for rad in German.
The constraint, don't have voice sounds at the end of a word, fights with the constraint. Don't change the letter D. In German, the don't have voice sounds constraint is ranked higher. It wins the fight. So the D dies and becomes a T.
It's a cage match.
It really is. The service form, we say, is just the survivor of a violent struggle between all these conflicting constraints.
Man, we have come a very long way from an Icelandic guy noticing that cat and bat are different.
It's an incredible journey. Went from the alphabet, which was just noticing categories, to the Kazan school, which put them in the mind, to the Prague school, mapping the binary features, to generative rules writing the code, and now to optimality theory, which is all about managing the constraints.
So when we zoom out, what is the big takeaway here? Why does this matter to the person listening to this on their commute?
I think it matters because it just shatters the illusion of passivity. We tend to think that we just walk around recording the world like a microphone. But this history proves that is completely false.
We aren't recording. We're computing.
We are actively constructing our reality. When you hear me speak right now, you are not hearing the acoustic truth. You are hearing a hallucination generated by your phonological system. You are projecting this grid of phonemes onto a chaotic world to make it understandable.
That is kind of terrifying, but also incredibly empowering. Language isn't just a habit, it's a piece of biological software.
Exactly.
Before we go, I want to leave the listener with one thought from the source material that is going to keep me up tonight. We've been talking about phonology as a way to get thoughts out, as the translation layer from my brain to your ear.
Right, externalization.
But the source asks, does that mean our internal thoughts have a sound structure? When I'm thinking to myself in total silence, am I thinking in phonemes?
It's the ultimate question, isn't it? If phonology is the operating system of language, does that mean thought itself is built out of these same oppositions? Are our deepest, most silent ideas constrained by the same rules of neutralization and stress that govern our speech?
We might be thinking in a code we didn't even know we were using.
And we are still just scratching the surface of cracking it.
That is all for this deep dive. Thanks for listening to us try to decode the atoms of language.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.